It doesn't seem like it's period correct. And if we can have something, look. Hi. Cool. What do you want? Some food. No, I didn't get it. Food. Unless you got fries, he'll take fries all day. It doesn't take much. This place gets dusted. I've always envisioned having a setup where every car has like a car cover that you put over it. It can be an indoor one, and then it has like a nice MCD1 logo or a signature. And then like the ones that we're working on, we pull them off, and then everything else kind of is protected. And then same thing when we go to film, we have like this isolated event where the focal point is just the one uncovered car. And then all this dust, because literally just every week, like we blow this whole place out, we sweep it all out, and like the cars get this layer, and it's so irritating. So if we could just consolidate that to the floors and not on the cars, it would be great. And if anybody knows anyone that does car cover stuff like that would like to help us out or work with us, I'd love to do that. But right now we're gonna do a quick Beth update. I don't know if it's gonna be very visually pleasing, but it'll at least be an update to kind of timestamp where we're gonna go next. Last time we were standing here, believe the car was pretty much just suspended on all fours. Suspension was on rear and front, engine, core support, all the stuff, grille, headlights. Right now we're at a process. As soon as we get the swingers off and the steering box off, then we're pretty much frame off on everything. I totally agree. You know, I think there was some comments, and I totally agree. I wish I could see this thing through with a Ford in it, but we're just doing this on a budget that makes sense for the owner, Jason, and you know, that's not in the budget. So having an LS in here, you know, we can do all the cool LS stuff and say it's cheaper and smaller and this and that and reliable and more easier horsepower to build and this and that, but I totally get it. Also, nothing sounds like a Ford. There's something about a nice Ford small block that is very unique and crispy, and the revs are really nice, but it is what it is. So right now, this is completely stripped of all the outside wiring. The dash is still in, so most of the interior is just intact, but the seats are out. We can look at that too. What we're doing here is we're preparing this to media blast. So we'll be moving this thing out, and we'll put it outside, and then we're gonna have there's businesses that are like a mobile sandblasting or media blast. They'll come out and then they're gonna get everything they can. So, you know, they're not gonna get the like exterior door or anything like that, but they'll get all this gunk, they'll get all the frame. There's a lot of areas in here that weren't welded. When I built this truck, I built it with the motor in, I never took it out. Like I said, I did what I could for the budget that I had and the time that I had. And now we have a chance to like make it really premium for what it is. The goal with this is not so much to cut it apart and to redo a bunch of stuff. The goal is to make this the best version of what it was always intended to be, which is a leaf spring under, 20-inch travel rear, you know, caged daily driver truck that's very capable for leaf springs. We want to be at the top of the food chain for leaf springs, just under like a Class 2000 leaf spring truck. With that, we're going to sandblast everything. When I was building it, I had that big modular 5.4 in here, so there's some really cool stuff that you guys might enjoy that's gapped, not welded, plasma cut, shave, blind welding, just all together. We'll probably put some really cool B-roll in, and you guys can just laugh your way home on that stuff. But that's what got this done when I was in that position of building it. It is what it is, and it worked remarkably well. The other thing I didn't have for a long time is I never had connector tubes. So I had like this engine cage with a cross member, and then there was never tubes from this point to that point, or this point down there. And the classic thing with these things is not only do they, the frame bends when you hit the bump zone, you crash into something or you G out, it bends upwards, and that's why you'll see like the panel or the doors will start making noises when you open them. But the other thing is they shimmy really crazy if you don't have something connecting. And a lot of times when you're going through rough terrain, it's never consistent. It's always something where a lot of times you're coming down one corner and it'll shimmy and it'll tweak this thing into oblivion. And I used to go to this place, I think it was called, it's either State Frame or Bear Frame in Pomona, like down past the railroad tracks. And they put it on a frame table and they stretch it back out. And it's been through a couple of those, and then finally I added these extra tubes, and it still wasn't really enough. So we have a chance now to dig into the actual foundation and get stuff right. And it's just so crusty and old. Like, let's go look at the back. Same deal in the back. It's all stripped down, but it's so crusty and old. We're gonna respray it, so it's better to just have the best opportunity, not only at getting the fabrication done and having nice clean areas to weld to or to add to, but it's also like to respray this thing. Like, this is crazy science project level weather that's been inside of the trunk compartment. And that's what this was. There was like a blanket. Like, this isn't rust buildup, that's like a blanket, like an emergency blanket. And I remember I've had to use that emergency blanket in Glamis. This thing is full of rich history. First night I took this thing out, I had paddles on it. Paddles with a low horsepower car are a blessing and a curse. If you park in a weird way or you need to reverse in a weird way, they act as a shovel, and they do not shovel sand out of your way. They dig your tires into a point of oblivion. So I remember I went down a crest. It was probably 1 a.m. Went down this huge crest. I had my buddy Dominic with me, maybe another friend, Damien. Go down this crest, right on the badlands of Gecko Road, where the dunes just start to finger into getting deeper. And I went down, and then I didn't know it was on the other side, so I just had to kind of cruise up and go a little bit sideways to start turning on the edge. And then it's all, and then I realized we were in this weird witch's eye, so I reversed, tried to reverse back, and I knew right there we were stuck. And fortunately, Johnny Branch, he was just coming into Glamis, and I don't know how we got a hold of him. Someone walked up, but that's what it was. Dom and Damien both walked all the way from where we were. I had it in the GPS, and I could see we were less than a mile from the road, but it seemed far. Those guys took off, left me no water like jerks, took off, walked all the way to Gecko. I think Dom had his girlfriend, and she was the water hogger person, She thought it was a dire situation. Walked all the way to Gecko, and then Branch was literally just rolling in there Morgan's stuck back there. And I remember it was so fucking cold. I had this blanket, and it was those felty emergency blankets. And I remember just sitting in there, and I didn't want to run out of fuel, so I didn't have the truck on. I remember just dug in, and I had the light bar kicked up, right on the peak of the dune, so someone could see there's just a light indicator in the dark. Anyways, all this is going to get sprayed, so I don't know if we're going to keep the silver like this, but we want to just have a good run at everything. This storage compartment is going to turn into a fuel cell area. There's a lot of good fuel cell variants that will fit in between the frame rails, so we're going to plug that back here. Yeah, the dirt bike feature was awesome, but to get this where we want to add rear fuel cell here, not the stock fuel tank that it had. trans cooler, oil cooler, maybe add another battery, dual pumps, and then quad filters. So, you know, a pre and a post filter for each pump. All that stuff will be remote. And then if I can later down the road, I'd love to tin this in and panel this in, but we'll see where we're at. The other thing that's missing out of here that's kind of a chunky part of the fabrication is the housing. So this is a Curry F9. There wasn't as many fabricated housings in 2012 as there are now. And Curry had this F9, and it was, you know, like obviously a premium would be like a Tube Works, but there wasn't a lot more. So I remember I specially ordered this thing. It was, you know, I specially ordered TIG on this whole thing. So they TIG welded it super wide, actually just as wide as the front, not a little narrower. So it made the car like a perfect square, and it was a blessing and a curse with some stuff. But I did a U-bolt delete in here, meaning like your factory leaf spring style setup has U-bolts that capture the axle, and there's a spring perch, and it kind of, you know, the spring perch is what sets the angle, and you tighten these things, and they fail, especially with severe use. The U-bolts fail, especially with a spring under, adds more pressure to them failing and pulling apart. So some guys do a U-bolt delete where they build a box structure, and then there's like 3/4 bolts that go through there and grab everything, and it's robust. This was a really ugly version of that I did. Like, again, once I had this thing out of the shop where I built it at my stepdad's, I had it in the driveway, and we had a project. You know, we always had like Chris's C10 or something in the garage, 2-car garage. So I'd always work on it in the driveway, and like when we got this housing, I'm like, all right, we got to get it together. Boom, put the housing on the, you know, on the bench, and we'll get it in. And I did it in like a weekend, and I didn't have any big tools. I didn't have a sheet metal brake or anything. So I did what I could with what I had. Same thing we do now. We just have a little more. And it was crude, but it was also, I took measurements off of the pinion angle that was on the factory 9.75 or 9 3/4 Ford housing. And I either messed something up or I read those backwards. I think I did a Morgan glitch. I don't think it was something where it was already built like that. And it made for a really bad pinion angle, and it was already built in. I should have checked it and mocked it up, and I didn't. And this thing would throw U-joints every 150 miles. So you may be able to get out to Barstow from Laverne, and then you will push the shit out of it, and that'll expedite the use on the U-joints. And then before you go home, you're gonna be broken down in the desert somewhere. And I had U-joint pliers and, you know, C-clip stuff and spare U-joints all in the driver's side, like door compartment. So I want to get that out of the way. It had this vibration that was the indicator of the U-joint being unhappy. And the vibration would come 70 to 95 miles an hour. So anywhere you want to be cruising on the freeway. And you could drive through it. So once you got to 96 miles an hour, it would smooth out, you know, and it would come at 70, leave at 95. So we're just getting this right. Like, that's the whole thing. Going through the whole thing. Proper plumbing, proper wiring, getting it right. Phase 1, this is not a phase 1, but what this is we got all the junk out of the way. So when we go to phase 2, we're already prepared. All this will be blasted back here. It'll be clean. You know, we're purchasing the coolers and the fuel cell in advance. This is going to get blasted. We'll send this to AJ with EWR. He can go through that thing. Check that out. So the next thing, we have ram assist that we're adding to this thing. We had like previously, you know, this was like my first pre-run truck. So I had no ram assist. I had a stock box. I had a stock power steering pump. This thing, if you were stagnant and you were just sitting in a parking lot, you could not turn it with 37s. You would have to be moving. Even if you're doing 2 miles an hour, you're still able to turn it. But then, you know, if you get into some situations in the desert, you know, and you need to crank on that wheel, it is double arm pump, doing everything you can. So box will get sent out and scribed. It'll get ported. Jeff Howe will do all that. We have his ram assist already. We have his pump already. We're going to plug the new LS in here, plug the 4L80, plug the billet output shaft, all that stuff into here. It's going to be a lot less spatially demanding. It can probably go back there quite a bit, you know, but once we have all this blasted, at some point we're going to want to like paint or do some kind of liner on this front firewall black, and then we'll put all either the gold shit in or some kind of, you know, heat shield product in here to like facilitate the heat. Plus the gold stuff looks cool. So if we have to do double and we put silver perforated stuff down and then gold on top, cool, more the merrier. We're gonna run the headers that the LS already has. The motor is a Texas Speed 6-liter. So heads, cam, all the stuff. Holley, engine management, fuel injection, obviously. And then, you know, I think probably run all the stock bracketry. So like the AC compressor, alternator, all that stuff will just, it'll be stock location. We have a new radiator coming in. We'll build a core support, and then one of the requests was to have a flip front hood. So we'll put new grille, new headlights, new corner lamps, and then we'll build out a structure here. You know, we'll tie some of this in, restructure whatever we have to, or just add stuff. The brake system is fine. We're gonna leave that. So we're just, literally this is phase one, like just getting the front done. And you know, that includes all the way back to the trans cross member, and then we're gonna leave it. We'll close that out, and then what we'll do is move to phase two. Phase two will be all of the rear. So get the axle sorted out, new drive line, limit straps, bump stops, I didn't mention that, but bump stops in the rear, coolers in, fuel cell in, get all that done. Stage 3 is the interior. There is no windshield bar going from the A pillar on the driver to the passenger. Just something, again, like I built this to be, I guess, I don't know if you want to say a low speed leaf spring pre-runner, but I would never do that again. It's just to negotiate a tube through there. It's a lot more involved than you'd think, where you can just run something straight through, unless you're deleting all your systems, like all your HVAC and all your ducting and all that. But at this point, I would, like, things changed. I would never settle for a roll cage not having a windshield tube, ever. So it's a non-negotiable at this point. We just got to pull it out and do it. Then we will integrate some kind of digital but circular looking gauges. We want to keep to like the analog gauge look, but since everything is going electronic with the sensors, we're just going to have to run digital circular gauges. I just putting one of those Holley displays into like an old Super Crew like this, I don't think that fits the vibe. So I think we left off with talking about all the instrumentation. So if we can get a new center console going, like, you want to see it, it's crude. A lot of stuff feels crude to me now, and it was just, you're building stuff for yourself, and I know, like, I take different pride now if I was building something for myself, but a lot of this was still like, get her done. I didn't facilitate design. With where we're at now with the company, design, it was like something I had to gently let myself loose on more and more and refine it more and more, and we're always evolving with design. But this is your simple, primitive race car stuff. You know, I look at it now, I'm like, oh man, I don't even want to keep going on how I would do things differently. But same with this stuff, you know, everything's cleared out. If we can get a center console in there, good. I'm pretty good on structure throughout the rest of this, just to refresh. I don't even know if we need to do a headliner or anything, just keep it simple. But at least, like I said, circular gauges in lieu of replacing the factory cluster. and it'll all be on Holley. I like the stuff where it's turnkey. If we don't have to have a Switch Pro and all that stuff, or at least we can hide a lot of that, the factory feeling to me is premium. You know, new exhaust, we'll keep the headers that come on the engine, new exhaust, new bedside mounts, and then it'll be 4 composite seats. We're gonna try to fit 3 seats in the back first, like a side-by-side seat. And if we can get 3 back there, then we're dialed. If not, then we're gonna run all, you know, 4 composite seats, like a shell seat. And it's just gonna be what it is. No bench, just isolated seats. So I wanted to share this stuff with you. Where we can look at some of the parts. I think they're already put away. One of the other things is when we had to press out the kingpin for the beam up here. If anybody's familiar with like a 1-inch kingpin on an I-beam truck, they can be seized in there pretty heavy. And we have one in the other shop, like the steel shop we have. And that is so seized in there, I don't know what we're gonna do. We've tried everything, and I hope it doesn't result to like cutting a beam end off. But we might have to drill through it and, you know, hit it out like that to relieve the pressure. We've tried quite a bit. So anyways, this is your Beth update. Definitely have this thing sandblasted and probably have like the engine and trans going next time you see it. I hope you guys enjoy. I wish I could share more process with this, but it is what it is. It's just gonna move at the pace that it does. I think the most exciting thing is seeing this. When I had this truck, it was awesome to me, and I thought it was the sickest thing. And you know, I must have been about 25 or 26, and I daily drove it everywhere, thousands of miles. I drove it every day, long distance commute, traffic commute, drove it to the desert, pre-ran race courses, drove it home. And it was always lacking stuff. It was always lacking having a fuel cell. I didn't even have a trans gauge, like a temp gauge in there. I wouldn't know when my trans was getting hot. I didn't have a cooler. Thing would blow a trans. Like, I didn't have ram assist. It was dangerous. It couldn't steer for shit. I didn't have any power. It probably had 180 horsepower. So for me to have this opportunity is huge, because we get to build it like this badass leaf spring truck that it always should have been. Even though it was cool, it wasn't cool for longevity or for functionality like it's gonna be now. So I'm excited to share this with you guys, and it feels, you know, it's not a huge caliber build, but it's a real full circle build for me. And I'm so grateful to have it as part of our story. Have a good day.